Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Wednesday, April 23rd, 2025. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, we have Superman's foreign rights fight, judges blocking Venezuela deportations under a wartime law, and major EU fines for Apple and Meta. Let's remember, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. And read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, April 23rd, 1969, Sirhan Bishara Sirhan was formally sentenced to death for the assassination of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, a tragedy that shook the United States during a period of intense political and social upheaval. Kennedy had been shot on June 5th of 1968, just after declaring victory in the California Democratic primary, and he died the following day. Sirhan, a 24-year-old Palestinian immigrant, was apprehended at the scene with a gun in his hand and later confessed to the crime during police interrogation. Despite the confession and trial conviction, as well as many witnesses to the act, controversy has surrounded the case for decades. In 1972, Sirhan's death sentence was commuted to life in prison after the California Supreme Court invalidated the state's death penalty statutes. A resurgence of interest in the case came in 1998 when Sirhan's attorney, Larry Teeter, publicly argued that his client had not actually fired the fatal shot. Teeter pointed to alleged inconsistencies in the autopsy report and the number of bullets fired, raising the possibility of a second gunman. Teeter's claims never gained traction in court, but they fed into ongoing skepticism among some legal observers and conspiracy theorists. Over the years, Sirhan has repeatedly sought parole, asserting he was manipulated and does not remember the events of the assassination. Most recently, in March of 2023, a California parole board again denied his release, citing concerns over public safety and lack of full accountability. The legal legacy of the case is complex, entangling questions of criminal justice, political violence, and the integrity of forensic evidence. It remains one of the most controversial political assassinations in U.S. history. A long-running legal battle over the rights to Superman has taken a new turn as the estate of co-creator Joe Shuster attempts to block the release of an upcoming film in several foreign markets. In a January 2025 lawsuit, executor Mark Warren Perry argued that copyright laws in the UK, Canada, Australia, and Ireland revert rights to heirs 25 years after the author's death, potentially invalidating the original 1938 agreement with DC's predecessor. This suit follows a 2023 federal ruling in Vetter v. Resnick that disrupted long-standing entertainment industry consensus by suggesting there is no separate category for foreign rights under the Berne Convention, meaning U.S. termination rights may apply globally. This theory directly challenges a 2008 Superman-related decision that limited termination to U.S. rights. Judge Shelley Dick's 2024 ruling supported the broader reading of termination rights, asserting that foreign copyright protections of U.S. works arise under U.S. law. Her opinion dismisses prior case law and scholar-backed consensus as insufficiently grounded. Legal experts are split on the implications, with some praising the reasoning as well-founded, while others see significant obstacles to enforcement abroad. Perry's effort is hampered by delays. He brought the suit years after the alleged 2017 rights reversion and by the steep burden of proving irreparable harm. Critics also question whether foreign courts will honor a U.S. ruling. The legal strategy comes as Superman is set to enter the public domain within the next decade, prompting what some view as a final attempt by Shuster's estate to reclaim financial control of the iconic character. Two U.S. federal judges have extended temporary blocks on the deportation of Venezuelan migrants and questioned the Trump administration's use of a centuries-old wartime law to expedite removals. President Trump invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798 in a March 15th proclamation to deport individuals allegedly affiliated with the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, sending many to a high-security prison in El Salvador under a $6 million deal with President Nayib Bukele's government. However, U.S. District Judges Charlotte Sweeney in Colorado and Alvin Hellerstein in New York signal that this use of the law likely violates due process rights. Judge Sweeney ruled that migrants detained in Colorado must receive at least 21 days' notice before deportation, while Judge Hellerstein suggested a minimum of 10 days in his Manhattan hearing. Hellerstein also raised constitutional concerns, referencing the Eighth Amendment's ban on cruel and unusual punishment and questioning the legality of mass deportations without individual review. The Supreme Court recently ruled that migrants must have the opportunity to challenge deportation, but left specifics undefined. Attorneys for the migrants, represented by the ACLU, argued that the Alien Enemies Act shouldn't apply as no formal war exists. Tren de Aragua's presence doesn't constitute one. The ACLU also sought a 30-day notice period consistent with practices during World War II when the law was last broadly applied. Meanwhile, another case revealed that a Salvadoran man had been mistakenly deported, prompting a federal judge in Maryland to demand documentation on the government's efforts to correct the error. The European Union fined Apple 5 million euros, or about 570 million US dollars, and Meta 200 million euros, or about 228 million US dollars, for breaching the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, a landmark law aimed at reining in the dominance of big tech. These penalties mark the first enforcement actions under the DMA, which seeks to promote competition by requiring dominant platforms to remove barriers for smaller rivals. Apple was penalized for restricting app developers from directing users to cheaper alternatives outside the App Store and for imposing disincentives, such as its core technology fee that discouraged the use of alternative app distribution channels on iOS. Meta's violations centered on its pay or consent model, which offered users either free, ad-supported access to Facebook and Instagram with data tracking or a paid, ad-free version. Regulators determined this structure did not comply with the DMA's requirement for user consent and fairness. Both companies have 2 months to adjust their practices or face daily fines. While Apple and Meta criticized the rulings, claiming they unfairly target U.S. companies, EU officials emphasized that all firms operating in Europe must respect these local rules. The fines were relatively small compared to previous EU antitrust actions, reflecting a strategic shift towards compliance over punishment and a possible effort to avoid inflaming U.S.-EU trade tensions. The U.S. administration under President Donald Trump has already voiced displeasure with European crackdowns on American tech firms and has threatened retaliatory tariffs. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment and can leave a rating or review on your podcast player, we'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly never that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever it is you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, he knows nothing and thinks he knows everything. That points clearly to a political career.